name is Itisha Giri. I'm one of the co-founders of Bozubaze. And welcome to All Ears, our very own podcast festival. We're very thankful to Splice Media, who sort of funded this little project of ours and who've also really supported us in sort of making this happen. We're excited because I feel like our guest is kind of like our soul sister of podcasting. Our journeys are very similar. And the reason why we podcast also, it's very similar. So I'm going to pass it over to my co-founder, my co-host.
Hi everyone, my name is Trikuti and I am the co-creator of Bojubaje, and we're excited to kick off the festival with this session with Nandar.
Minglawa. You are listening to Myanmar first feminist podcast Jiro Zagawai, brought to you by Purple Feminist Group. In this podcast, you'll be hearing inspiring stories of Myanmar women and girls who are bringing social, economics, and political changes around the world. This is your host Nanda.
Hi Nandar, welcome to All Ears.
Hi, Bilkuti, and hi, Disha. Thank you. Thank you for having me on this podcast festival along with many other amazing Nepali and international podcaster. Like, I would like to really go off and say that I'm a fan of your podcast. The work you do is so important to the younger generation, and I think you have inspired so many minds through your conversation, and I hope you know that. And yeah, I just want to put it out there.
Thank you so much.
So, Nandar, I think the first question that we would like to ask you is, you have two podcasts. One is Feminist Talks, which is sort of more for the international audience, and then you have another podcast as well. Can you tell us a bit about the two podcasts and how perhaps they're different from each other or similar?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think, first of all, like the reason that I started the first podcast, which is a bit difficult to pronounce those who are not local, it's called Jiro Zagawai. And the name itself is very similar to Bojubaje kind of message. It's a way of like telling that boss lady, like, but older lady, like, when a woman is so assertive and curious and know her place, people just give them the bad name. So my job there was to take ownership on that name. Yes, I am Jiro. Jiro bani त्यस्तै बोजुबाजे जस्तै खालके. So it's like धेरै धेरै बोल्ने जता पनि घुस्ने, like, that sort of thing. So and I wanted to take ownership. Yes, I am that person. Like, let's have conversation. Let's be that person, all of us together. So that Jiro Zagawa started off when I had little time to write, and I wanted to continue fueling the conversation around women issue and storytelling. So I started off this, but Feminist Talk was started after the pandemic. I think we all create something when we were in quarantine or when we were working from home. We were having too much time from our social life. So the social life, no, like really, we were just kind of trying to be creative, learn new skill, la la la. So I was like, I started Feminist Talk. It was more kind of uncensored conversation. Like with Jiro Zagawa, it was limited because I was inviting hosts that were doing more on a ground level of work. So I had to consider about their security and a lot of other things. But with Feminist Talk, it was more casual, friend-based, and people that I know who are not afraid to challenge on a kind of deeper level on patriarchal values and belief. It's more sort of like uncensored, but Zagawa is like more professional based, where you are specific and you have certain agenda. It's also because you have a specific kind of audience there. With Feminist Talk, it's more
because you mentioned these considerations, risk, security, considering sort of the political and social context of where you're from, Myanmar. What has and perhaps other similar locations as well, where women are in a situation where they're having to counter obviously patriarchal structures, but also this very turbulent, economic, political, and social sort of dynamics. So in this kind of environment, podcasting as a tool, what has it allowed you to do? And perhaps, you might have noticed other podcasters who are women as well, who are sort of using that tool for similar purposes.
Mm-hmm. That is such a great question, because I realized that, while starting the podcast, the first podcast, Chiro Zagawa, I realized quickly that, in Myanmar, when you're living in a country where dictatorship has been like a throughout your lifetime, or your parents' lifetime, even you have been always raised to be very wary of your security. And I think because of that reason, even before this coup stages, we were very concerned about like how are we going to measure this, doing the security measurement for those women who are going to be in this podcast. But the good news was that because it's an audio based production, the security measurement is not as risky as other thing where you have photos or where you have videos where people can see your faces and know your location, that sort of thing. But with the podcast, what I also do is like I don't sit at my home and like interview people at that time, because COVID didn't happen. So I was traveling around Myanmar and like going and meeting all these women in their places, so it was also less burden for them in that way, where I was the one who was doing the traveling and like investing my energy and time more than they have to. But also the other thing I would say, that because it was an audio based podcast, podcasting, there was, after this coup happened, everyone was taking down their videos and articles because of the security risks. But with the podcast, it was not like you don't have to do it, because you just have to change the name. That's it. That's the minimum thing you have to do. The rest of the thing, it's very less likely to be traceable. So because of that reason, I think podcasting has been also the other thing I think useful to know, those who have not started podcasting, is that unlike video production, with the podcasting, you don't have to think about what you're gonna wear, and like if the lighting is okay and all these kind of basic things, you have to be presentable when you're on TV. But with the podcasting, you can be in pajamas and like do the recording. It's super flexible in so many ways. Only budget pani very friendly chucky. Like it doesn't cost you a lot. Just a recorder, like recorder china, when you see, you can use your phone to record and like produce it and carry your phone all over the world and do that work as well. It doesn't have to be in one location. So there's so many opportunities doing a podcast. Of course, it also has its own difficulty, but I think there are more opportunities than its challenges. Hey.
Nanda, because I remember you talked about this, about being new to this medium. Unlike a lot of podcasters, like myself, like I did journalism, I had like a fair idea about the medium, or at least the craft of sort of like audio storytelling. But for you said like you sort of like stumbled into this this medium. So we've already sort of like talked about it. For a lot of our participants today, many of them might be interested in starting their own podcast, or might have just started a podcast. So what are some of the lessons that you like learned along the way, in terms of whether it's about the technical side, or other things that you might have learned as someone who sort of like stumbled into this medium?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I think that's such an important thing to remember, that even though like I'm officially now called as a podcaster, whenever people addressed me, I used to have no idea about what a podcasting is in 2017, like till 2017. I used to listen podcasts, but it was not something that I thought that I could do. So because of that reason, I did a lot of research, like just basic thing, like reading a lot of articles and doing a lot of YouTube listening and learning, and also taking some classes on Skillshares. So I think basic thing would be that give up the idea of you have to be perfect, or you have to be so trained in order to be a podcaster. Like you're training पढेनी बल्ल हुन्छ, त्यो training गरेनी बल्ल हुन्छ, उसको podcast को education लिए बल्ल हुन्छ. Don't take that pressure on you, because I think especially now with the help of internet, there are so many things that you can learn just by having a YouTube or having a stable internet. So just अनि produce गर्दा पनि don't think that you have to be like perfect and say the right thing and be the right person for everyone. Okay, there will always be people who will not like your work, no matter how perfectly you produce it. So let go of this idea that everyone has to like you, or you have to be perfect at producing it. just start where you are with what you have. And I think that's the great place to start. And also the other thing that is useful to have, I would say, is that have a friend circle or like your tribe, okay, that can support you no matter if you're producing a shitty podcast or like, you know, how long or how short you're producing it, okay? Because when you have that kind of tribe, it also inspire you. Also, please have people that will give honest feedback, okay? Sometimes we are so used to like wanting to hear good thing, like राम्रो मात्रै भनेको सुन्नमा लाग्छ, नराम्रो भनेको सुन्नमा लाग्दैन नि, like it's a human nature, of course, but I think it's also important as someone who became some sort of like in a public resource, in a way, you have to be able to accept those kind of like criticism or feedback that comes with producing the podcast, and it's going to be a part of being a podcaster, and learn to be okay with it. Like, you know, you will not be happy all the time. But also the other thing very important I wanted to say for everyone who's here, I think I talked to you guys, is about money. I think it's people don't really talk about money no matter what kind of conversation we are talking, especially I think as activists, like, you know, you are expected to give and give and give like for free, eh? It's women over in the John, like you have to be just giving and never expect to get anything back. Only like when you expect something back, it sounds so selfish and so arrogant, okay? Choli manjele ke compensation e mangna hunna, okay? It's like, you're women, you're born with vagina, you're supposed to be giving and like, you know, not wanting anything. And I think that is such a wrong thing to put it in, like in your mind, because as a human being you need to survive, you know, through this afternoon life ma jainjo. That's why I think when you're doing a podcast, for sure, of course, initially paisa nabhaikina gareko, that's okay, but I think learn to find resources where you can get funding, technical support. And I know Splice have been like, when they are giving funding, they just not only provide you funding, they also provide you with technical supports. And there are also smaller funding where like Frida, like Young Feminist Fund, where they give money to almost every young feminist organization that are doing an important work in their own local areas. So I look out for those kind of opportunities. And as women who are ahead of us, I think it's important for us to provide those resources and like share those resources to the younger generation, that like मेरो मात्रै हो, मैले मात्रै राख्छु भन्ने त्यस्तो माइन्डसेट नराखिकन शेयर गर्ने मेन्टालिटी पनि राख्नुपर्छ। अनि सेल्फ एफिकेसीलाई पनि आई थिंक राख्नुपर्छ। भात खान पर्छ नि है, भात खान पैसा चाहिन्छ, पडकास्टले खान
By the way, guys, all these sessions are free, but no, but as women, as trans women, as feminists or other marginalized communities, when we do sort of take space that perhaps has been always taken over by one particular community that has had like power historically, structurally, you know. So when you started like a feminist podcast in Myanmar, no, you're kind of shaking up the system. You're right. So I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to ask you a little bit about sort of the reaction that your podcast, gets. Okay, obviously from your fans, from your community, but do you ever find yourself in a situation where you're like, oh, okay, that's not what I need and that's not what I wanted, but it's a backlash against maybe your ideology or just the walk or because we definitely, feminists in Nepal are kind of
I know, and I'm like enjoying your questions because I feel like nobody really asks those kind of difficulty being a feminist in like these days. They just want you to have like thick skin and be okay with everything that is coming along the way. I think there's a lot of criticism and also almost a lot of threats as well, like I do a lot of work that are not only podcasts but also general public speaking and like saying words people are uncomfortable hearing, like such as vagina, abortions, menstruation. These are the words that just saying those words freak people out and they just want to like disappear, from where they are. And I think because I touched the topic that are very, very close to people heart, that people are very, very like protective of. It's so difficult. Like when I'm talking about these things, it makes them feel like that I am attacking them personally. Like, I remember when I was doing an episode on abortion, there were so many people, older people, younger people, saying that it shouldn't be a woman's right, women should not kill people, like, and they were taking consideration of a human, of a blood, or like a cloth of blood that is having slight life, more consideration than a woman who is alive and like 34 years old, like, and I think because of these kind of very close-minded people in our country, but also across the globe, it makes a feminist like us to kind of difficult or slow down our process of having an important conversation. Okay, and I think this great very big disservice. I remember there was one guy, particularly when I was doing a podcast on menstruation as well, and he sent me a long, it was not even on my friend list at that time. He sent me like 10 audio messages, and I thought he was saying something important, and I started listening to it, and all those 10 audio were about how he will kill me if I go to his city, and how he will, like, do things to my family, what he will do. And I think I remember, as much as I thought I was strong, like, I can get it together, I have thick skin, all these blah 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 thing I say to myself, at that moment I felt so vulnerable, because it came from a Nepali man from Myanmar, and it was, I thought he was like my community member, and I think that very moment I felt the vulnerability that comes with being a sort of like, I don't want to use big word, but a public figure. Like when you're putting yourself out there, it also comes with a lot of vulnerability. It's easy to attack you, your identity, your family, and everyone around you also is at risk. It's not an easy journey, mentally, also physically.
Yeah, I mean, how do you deal with
No,
that?
that's
Like,
no, yeah.
I think okay, go tamai jancha hola. I think having a tribe, I have such a strong community, Bormama. It's like no matter what happened to me, there's always someone in the group who had faced those things, and they would give me advices like saying that, oh, this is how we can handle, like, if you need a lawyer, I have a feminist friend who is a lawyer, like, so when you have a strong community who knows different things than you do, it makes you feel stronger, then makes you think that you're not alone. And because I have that kind of very strong, diverse feminist activist tribe with me, and it makes me feel less lonely, first of all. Okay, and I think Malay happen very, very important that I want to highlight with what Lily Singh, a comedian, once said, that please make sure to surround yourself with people that do exact kind of job that you do, because आफूले गरेको काम जस्तै काम गरेको मान्छेले आफूले पीडा गरेको चिजलाई पनि उले राम्रैसी बुझ्न सक्छ के. Like if you go talk to a writer about what's like to be an actor, I don't think they can understand you. So because of that reason, you must at least have, if you're an actor, have an actor friend who understand the pain that comes with being this kind of known person in the media, or like in the movie industry. So I think when you surround yourself with that kind of like-minded journey people, it makes it easier for you to move forward. And Arko, very important advice lastly is that I once heard from a feminist that says, don't read anything on the internet. If you read if you read on what is on the internet about you, you will want to produce whatever you are producing. Like, and I think that is so true. Okay, like no matter no matter how great of a work that you're doing, there will always be some people that will criticize you. Only the John, like popular cancel culture, nature, like you can't say one thing wrong. It's like everyone wants to cancel you, and I think that is such a damaging thing that we are doing to human. We are human. We are allowed to do mistake. We are allowed to grow, and like we need to create that room, okay? And we need to find in our own space, in our mind, to be okay with that kind of thing, okay?
just coming back to something positive that you touched on about creating a community of, like-minded people who's there to support you, especially being a female on the internet. I think not just podcasters, anybody, like even if you write like something, like post a picture about your holiday, there'll be people saying tons of things. So that's just, I think, like unfortunately a universal experience for women on the internet. But I wanted to understand, and a lot of our participants might also be interested in, is how creating this podcast and actually trying to push for space has had any sort of impact. Has there actually been, because I know you were on the very prestigious BBC 100 women list, and that sort of acknowledgement, has that helped in taking this conversation further away, I mean, like further into, let's say, the quote unquote mainstream media, or like, because sometimes we feel like you are podcast गरेछ त हामीले, we are just talking to ourselves, or like to our 50 selected people who agree with us. So
we're
and
just
that's something
listening to
we
our
really
own
struggle with,
episode like 20
is
times.
our yeah yeah, are our ideas the kind of things that, the reason why we did this podcast in the first reason, is this resulting in having these conversations, ideas beyond this certain group? And also maybe like a few anecdotes of like girls and women reaching out to you through your podcast, because that is something a lot of our podcaster friends say, like, okay, because of the content you are certainly having this community, online community, right? So त्यसको बारेमा केही भनिदिनुहुन्छ कि? And also this is going to be our last question before we open, try to take some questions or comments, so please त्यहाँ पनि type गर्नु होला.
Yeah, I think okay, I hope I'm not forgetting your question, but I think about going back to being recognized, I think there's a lot of benefit of being recognized by international or just even in your local places, but I think it also comes with its own vulnerability. Like, the more you are known, the more you are likely to be criticized. This is what I noticed with my Feminist Talk pages, where the more followers are increasing each day, it's like the more unwanted audience that I'm getting. You know what I mean? When it was the smaller community, there were certain things that you could control, that you could there were good people that are there just to observe the knowledge and learn from one another. But I think when it reaches to more people, I realized that there were also people just are sitting there waiting for you to say one wrong thing, and then they will come and eat you alive. Okay. And I think that is one of the vulnerability that comes with being known in some way. And I think the other thing that is like the good part of it is that, after being recognized by the BBC, or even like getting nominated for some awards in inside Myanmar, what I notice is that, of course, award I'll be continue doing whatever I'm doing, that we all are going to do it. Like, it's award is not going to make our words better, or more smarter or anything like that. It's us that they are giving the award or nominating us. And I think what I notice is that when you are recognized by so-called institute, it's also, I think, very colonial thing. Okay, like when you are recognized by a certain group, it just legitimizes what you're saying. Like, it's just like, oh, okay, they approve this person, so this person must be worthy of listening. You know what I mean? And I think that comes with very colonial mindset, and I do not like that. But also because it has its own advantages, I also want to recognize, after being recognized at BBC, there are so many young people that I get to meet just because I was there. I think they want to see me. Who is this? Like, त्यति त curiosity पनि मान्छेलाई धेरै interest पार्दो रहेछ के. They were not interested in feminism or Nandar, but they were interested in who is this BBC 100 women Myanmar person. I think that's what I think about. Like, shortly to answer about the audience reaching out, so many people, I think, particularly when we are talking about abortions and menstruation, those are the kind of thing I would say. I would go as far as saying that our organization is the only one organization that talks about menstruation and abortion publicly, and have run campaign about those two things in Myanmar so publicly. And because of that reason, there were so many women, young women, and young girls that came to us sharing their stories of abortion, sharing their stories of when they first came, period, and how they felt and how they were treated by the society, how their self-esteem has lost during that period, so I think these kind of stories, what we did afterward is like make a storytelling format and share with larger audience to inspire. So I think we give the platform that we were creating to the younger women to tell their story by themselves, not we telling their story. And I think this is why podcast is amazing. You are not telling other people's story, you are inviting them and letting them tell their own story. You're just creating a platform. You're not being the voice of voiceless, so-called, that kind of cliche thing. So I think that's why everyone should do podcast.
Yeah, I mean, the podcasting scene is definitely expanding in Nepal at the moment, and that's really exciting. So we're at the 10:30 mark, and we need to wrap this up in 15 minutes. So we do have a comment, Nandar. Juliana Shrestha, who I believe is a podcaster too, she's from Dulua Talks, and she's commented that she can definitely relate to you. And she says that she agrees completely that you should start with what you have and you learn as you go. I think in regards to what you were saying about the don't feel pressured to be perfect when you're podcasting. So yeah, no, totally. If you listen to our episodes, but we have like 67 episodes, the quality, the audio quality is like this. Each episode is different.
Yeah.
Now that I did have a question in regards to like your position, okay? Because you're a feminist, you're an activist, but feminist who's sort of resisting multiple points of oppression, whether it's like authoritarian, or whether it's like the regime, or whether it's, your ethnicity maybe in the context of Myanmar, and obviously then women's rights. So it's the multiple points of oppression, like counter garda or resist garda. Like how would you describe where you are in relation to all of these different points of oppression?
That is such a deep and very personal question, and I think this is like, I don't normally talk about this particular internal struggle that I go through as a Nepali like me, like someone who look like me. In Myanmar media you will not see anyone. I'm the first Nepali in as a podcaster, as a feminist, as someone who is doing activist work, like as a young woman. Okay, you go and look at the Myanmar history. There's no Nepali women's history that is recognized by the whole nation. So being the first in a way just is very empowering, and it inspire you to feel that I like, it brings some sort of justice to your family or to your people. Okay, like it's like you are visible, and your visibility is going to bring some sort of justice or recognition for your people. But also I want to quickly say other thing is like, I honestly said that when I was in Nepal in 2019 as well. Matin Jautariko discussion ma मैले यो कुरा नि भनेको थिएँ. For a long time in my life, because of my identity, I couldn't really feel like proud, or I was not certain where I belong or who I really belong, because I grew up speaking 3 languages and exposed with 3 culture simultaneously. This too, I was so confused and so lost. Like, am I Nepali? Am I Burmese? Because I was born there, or am I Shan? It was the local people there, and I was so confused and so lost, and I never identify myself in a larger group that I am Nepali. Koile pani bhanthina. This is like me being very honest with you guys here, that I used to never say that, because I wasn't sure what is there to be proud as a Nepali, what is there to be recognized as Nepali. So instead I would just say I'm from Shan state, and I would go along with it because it was much more easier to be that kind of invisible identity. But then gradually I realized that, my identity is where I started my activism. यो मेन्सुरेटा बुले गर्दा नि मलाई यो मान्छे पारेको, म यो एक्टिभिजम जर्नी स्टार्ट गरेको, त्यही म मेरो आइडेन्टिटीलाई एम्ब्रेस गर्न एकदम जरुरी छ भन्ने, त्यही लिटरेचरसँग इन टच हुँदाखेरि that's when I started to kind of slowly get comfortable, proudly announce myself as a Nepali feminist activist from Burma. And I think that alone speaks a lot about what kind of challenges I go as a Nepali feminist in Myanmar. Of course, because of my visibility now, it's a lot easier. But then for that to happen, I had to go through a lot mentally, but also physically outside as well.
Yeah.
To quickly answer that question would be that after the coup happened, initially I was just focusing on telling the stories of women, how they have been resisting the patriarchy particularly. But after the regime happened, we have to shift our conversation into mental health, because at that time, I couldn't work because mentally we were all frozen. We didn't know if there's a point of doing anything or if it's safe at all to do anything. So I couldn't do anything for 2 months. The whole organization was paused because of the coup, and that's when we reflect and try to assess the situation, what kind of conversation we have to start with this podcast, because we have to continue. So only after I left Burma, that's when I started kind of having a clarity on what kind of direction we have to go after the coup happened. So because of that reason, we started on solely for season 2 was solely on mental health, for people to have a space to learn about mental health, also to continue having conversation and ask question about those kind of issue with a therapist. We talk to her and have this dialogue about survival guilt, grieving, and self-care, those kind of basic things. We started having conversation, and I think this is why podcast is good, that you don't have to set one agenda. Each season can have its own theme, and you can adapt to the situation. So that's how I've been adapting, like creating conversation around what the people are needing to listen or hear would be my main focus. Yeah. Such an important question that in activism, that we have been starting to talk about it recently, but it has not been talked about for so many years, and I had no idea about how you should be taking care of your mental health when you're doing this kind of work for a long time, up until recently actually. And I think one of the thing I do is, like, every time I'm interviewing people, especially those who are going through gender-based violence, it's very triggering, because I think almost all of us have faced, or at least hear the stories about how our close one have gone through the gender-based violence. And because of that reason, when those kind of things are happening, I feel very triggered and very emotional, and like even sometimes uncontrollably crying, with them together. And I think at that time, because I remember that these kind of stories are what I remind myself that these kind of story, or these kind of injustices and inequality, are what pushes us to be who we are, what pushes us to be a feminist. I think had the world be like, if the world is an equal and non-violence place, we did not have to be a feminist. And I think those kind of story at the end of the day remind me that as long as these kind of injustices and inequality exist, this is all the more reason for me to exist, or for this podcast to exist. But also I take a lot of break. I laugh, I dance, I go crazy. Like, if you see me alone at this room, right, like when I'm not doing work, I sing like a crazy person, and I listen to Brikuti Rai, Patrika Rai, sorry, Brikuti Rai. Brikuti Rai also, Patrika Rai. I know you guys, I almost thought you guys were sisters, initially. So Patrika Rai song, and
we're distant cousins. We are distant cousins, yeah.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense now. Okay, please tell her that, no? So I listen to song,
I will.
go out, just give yourself a break. I think we do a great disservice when we think we don't deserve break, and we continuously doing what we do without taking a break. We all deserve to take a break.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing that, for saying that.
Yeah, for saying that, because sometimes you kind of forget me. You put so much importance on the work that you kind of just forget how important yourself, what the state of well-being, तिम्रो आफ्नो well-being भुलेर होइन, this work is so important, I have to keep going, I have to keep going, and before you know it, you're like burning out, and so yeah, त्यो एकदमै important हुन्छ. So we have a comment from Priyanka, who's Period Ka Kurako podcaster.
Hi Priyanka, I know her, yeah.
We have their session with Period Ka Kura and Gulabi Samvad on Sunday, guys. So if you haven't signed up for that session, please do. So Priyanka says, hold on, let me find this. This is such, where did it go? Priyanka says, such an intriguing conversation, guys. Always empowering listening to Nandar. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're up to this afternoon?
Oh, yeah, sure. Drum roll, the Vagina Monologue Show for the first time outside of Myanmar. So it's happening in Bangkok and in Chiang Mai. So if you're here, please come. But if you're not here, send me your vagina power.
Because we actually met, Prikruti and I met during auditions. We auditioned for Kathmandu edition, and that's how we met as well. So as I said, we have a lot in common.
So
but I think, sorry, go on.
No, that's so sweet.
So I think from that conversation, what we just had, like, if I were to just kind of bring it all together, the reasons why we have to keep changing, keep adapting, putting ourselves at the center, but still creating space for other voices to tell their own stories, being aware of the possible risks and sort of planning for it in advance, and also really using the audio medium for what it is. Like, it's easy to use and low cost, DIY, and really a medium that I think best serves feminists, marginalized communities, because anyone can just, like, if you have a phone, you can just record and just put it. So Nandar, I hope you keep pushing for space. I hope you keep creating space as you are, and we send all of our love and strength to you, and all the best for the show as well. And as always, like, thank you so much for joining us today. And on that note, I'm going to say goodbye to Nandar. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll chat more.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for everyone who joined the section and who's watching on live. I'm going to rock the vaginas. So bye.
All the
bye.
best.
Good luck. Care. Bye.
And thank you to all of our participants.
Thank you, everyone.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.